I've never been in a black hole like that in my life. You got kind of cancelled for anything. And if you weren't a part of the trend, your comments were just insane. I was so unfiltered and so raw on my YouTube. I looked like a shredded 12-year-old. I was going through a breakup. My job was to work out. I was at the gym for 3 hours. 3 hours a day. My diet fluctuations started because of my skin and then became about being shredded, having abs, or being part of a culture. I definitely got in this spiral of needing to look like the rest of the Fitspo girls. I lost my period and I look back and I'm like, sis, you weren't eating enough. He kind of said, this baby's gonna have no quality of life. I was just preparing myself for the worst case scenario. And then people were like, just confirm or deny, does he have Down syndrome? I'm like, I'm not gonna play this game. I was just a shell of a human.
Amazing, we're just gonna go straight into it. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
A few disclaimers. This may look like, it looks like we're literally on a news set.
I was thinking, when I walked in, I was like, this is very like Today
news.
Show.
Yeah, well.
Today.
I was like, we need to get an auto cue. But for everyone watching from home, we are at the Meta Studios in Sydney, which is very, very exciting. And that is literally why we look like we're about to announce the morning news, or we may well do that. Just stay tuned. Second disclaimer is I have my phone in my hand. I am not watching TikTok. I find Sarah very interesting.
Yeah, am I boring you?
I usually have the stuff printed out, but I am in Australia, and Australia doesn't have printers.
We're just not working here.
So
we're old school.
Exactly. So I want to go back to the very beginning.
Yeah.
The beginning of your career, the beginning of you sharing things online. I know at the time it wasn't necessarily, you didn't necessarily think of it as the beginning of your career.
The word influencer wasn't even a thing. This was like 2013, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 2013. And I was just suffering with really bad hormonal acne. It was the first thing I thought of when I woke up. It was the last thing I thought of when I went to bed. It was consuming my life. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't look people in the eyes. It was the core focus of my life. And I remember doing different diets or eating different things, just trying every avenue to try to heal my skin. And people would ask me, whether it was like friends or strangers I would meet, about what I'm doing to try to fix my skin. So I decided to make this little Instagram to kind of document it, because I was like, for me and for maybe an audience. And I would just post like chia seed water and like different scrubs I was using. And eventually I did clear my skin, but I had like 700 followers. Like I never thought about it. It wasn't. And then I think people started asking me like, oh, what do you work out? Like, what do you do for fitness? And I was like, okay. So, and this was before Instagram was video. So I would just like post a photo at the gym being like, I just did crunches. Like, and that's what I did. And then in terms of the comments, people would ask me really specific questions where I was like, I was so over replying through comments that I was like, you know what? I'll do a video. I'll just sit down and do a video. And at the time I had a little bit of a love for editing. I wanted to be a cameraman for the footy show, which I got told that no female would ever get that job.
Right.
So anyway, good times. So I thought this will kind of fulfill my love for film. I can edit it, but then I can also answer the questions easier through like my verbal videos on YouTube. That was 2013, had no idea. Influencer wasn't a word. It was for fun. It was a hobby.
Yeah, because that was about 2 years before I started. And when I started.
Did you start after me?
Yeah. I started 2015.
I told everyone like you were the OG. I'm the OG OG.
You're the OG.
Stop trying to be me. I remember just watching your vlogs and you were always studying. Yeah. And I was like, stop. And then I left uni and you were still at uni, and I was going to comment being like, leave.
You need to stop.
You need to leave.
I know. Well, I often think that like that was actually one of the main reasons for my YouTube having blown up, was the fact that I never got into like the unrelatable like influencer having, you know, really young, living in their own apartment, any of those things, because I was still in the same room being like writing an essay today.
Same. Like I made that focus to I don't want to name and shame people, but there were certain Australian influencers who were super relatable, and then their content just became about like buying a Louis Vuitton bag, having an Hermes bracelet, and I was like, I can't relate to you anymore. And I don't think it wasn't, I guess there was an element of consciously trying to maintain relatability, but my family to this day are the people who will ground me and say, what are you doing? Why are you posting that? Why are you buying that? So I think it's like, yeah, maybe a little bit of tactic was staying relatable, but everyone around me was like, remember who you are, stop. So I think I'm really lucky in that sense that the people around me kept me grounded and was like, remember why you did this. Remember why you did YouTube. You're trying to help people. It's not about you and showing off what you have and what you can do. It's helping others through your mistakes and things you're trying.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And I want to go into that more later. At the very beginning of kind of when you were posting and stuff, can you give a little timeline in terms of like when it started getting traction, what you were kind of posting about at the time?
It's always, I feel it will never change, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, or whatever. Unfortunately, it's always some kind of scandal or some kind of emotional roller coaster will often make you go viral. And it was not purposeful. I went through a breakup. So I was with my ex-boyfriend for 7 years.
Yeah.
He was a part of my channel. Do you remember? He was a part of my channel, but he was an introvert, right? Which was also really hard because people in the comments, still to this day, they're brutal. So if you have someone who's an introvert on your channel, it comes across as rude. It comes across as that person doesn't like you. That person doesn't want to be around you. It's like, no, they're introverted. And when there's a camera in front of them, they go inside. So he was an introvert, so it was kind of hard to vlog around him because he didn't really want to be on camera.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And I guess you started this midway through your relationship rather than it being something that you started with.
Yeah, well, even like kind of at the end of our relationship. So I went through a breakup and I still am to this day, but during that breakup, I was so unfiltered and so raw on my YouTube. And it was the time that cancel culture hadn't really kicked in yet. And I also didn't have the following I have now where everyone who followed me was there for a good reason. They were there because they liked watching me and they were rooting for me. So I felt safe to be super vulnerable. I remember the one vlog that people still bring up to this day of how they found me was I was sitting in the car, my vlogging camera broke, and he worked in tech. And he would be the one who would normally fix it. And I sat in the car, I filmed on my phone or something, and I just started crying saying, it's the first time that my breakup's hitting me. Anyway, that kind of scene, I guess, went viral and people started following me about how are you going to get through this breakup? How you've been with this guy for 7 years. How are you going to find yourself and not go off the rails? So that was like a snowball effect. And I think I got like 30,000 followers within like 2 weeks or something. And I was so shocked. I kind of didn't know what to do with it, but I wanted to maintain my vulnerability.
And the rest of the content that you were posting at that time, was that more kind of like, had that already gone into health and fitness beyond the
health
acne?
and fitness?
Yeah.
It was fully health. So acne was kind of the start. And then when I started opening up about my fitness routine, that got a lot of, a lot of focus and a lot of attention. So I was a health and fitness channel. Like that was I think my bio is it. I haven't even changed my YouTube bio in years. It was like health and fitness YouTube channel. And then the more people get to know you, the more they want to know about like, show your family, show your boyfriend. Like, so yeah, it was health and fitness. And to this day, it kind of is. I guess we'll go into that more, but channels evolve, but the core I think will always stay.
Yeah, it's so interesting because obviously like health and fitness, when you look at influencers, if it's their entire content, obviously it's really, really helpful, but it's also, I started my fitness journey following a lot of fitness influencers, and I'd be looking at them and I'd be like, how the fuck do you do that? How the fuck do you look like that? All of this. Yeah. And then I'd also be like, when you really start thinking about it and you're like, okay, but your literal job is to go to the gym.
Yes.
So of course you look like that.
Yeah.
And of course and like, no hate at all. I think, I was in that position at one point, but it's also, I think, one of the healthier things when people's content revolves around more than that.
Totally.
If they decide to do that, because of course it's no one's duty to be sharing like their personal life or beyond that. But I really think that at least it shows a bit more of a rounded view in order for someone to think, because I used to get so insecure at like looking at all of these people with the most unbelievable bodies and like having, even like in terms of actual like lifting, what they were lifting, all of these different things. And it's like, but, in terms of their meals, in terms of when they can work out, in terms of all of these things, that is literally their job. Yeah. And so they are able to revolve everything around that. Yeah. When at the time I was, getting up at 5 a.m. to be able to do it before work. Yeah. And then being called in early.
I only had a small amount of time where that was my job.
Right.
Because at the start, when I first started, I was in uni and I was working in retail.
What were you studying at uni?
Primary education. I was in this point when I started that I didn't know. Actually, no, when I started, I think I was in marketing college. I don't even know. I've kind of jumped around to different things because I just didn't feel like I loved anything. I was like, yeah, I would be a good teacher because I'm so extroverted and like creative and whatever. But I never found my niche until I started my YouTube channel, and I had no idea you could even make money from it, right? Like I felt such purpose getting up every day and filming, and I feel like there's such power in knowing your authentic self and what you are so passionate about. Like there's a reason people are passionate about different things. And getting up and filming every day, I remember thinking, imagine if this could be my job. And if I ever get in a rut now where I'm resenting filming or resenting YouTube for any reason, I always try to humble myself and think how unhappy I was at uni. Think how unhappy I was at prac doing teaching. Like, this is my job. You are so lucky.
Yeah.
But I don't even remember your question. I just go on tangent. But in terms of, I guess, health and fitness and showing more of myself, naturally, I'm an oversharer. All of my friends, all of my family will vouch for this. You ask a question, I will literally tell you what underwear I'm wearing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like a tactical or strategic decision to be like, I'm going to open up more. I I'm 100 or nothing.
I relate to that so strongly because I've actually had to, when I've made a more conscious decision, which I have, to share less online, it's like, it's actually really hard because I sit down naturally with someone and I will, as you say, like I'll end up like splurging about like a date I went on or like any of these things, and it'll be like,
I'll tell you what part of my menstrual cycle I'm in. I'm like, what's your discharge like? Let's talk about it. So, and that's my family. Like my family, we're super open with everything, like everything. So I find it really hard to be like,
perfect job for you then.
Yes. Yeah, but with kids it gets tough. No, that's where it gets tricky.
I can fully imagine. Yeah. And so what time around was this when it blew up with the breakup and kind of your content started?
2016, I think. Yeah. 2017, I remember as like my pinnacle year. I met Kurt, my now husband. I was so sus of him. I was so sus because he was a photographer, and I remember telling him I had this idea that I wanted to make this fitness ebook, right? People were asking me, what's your fitness routine? And I could only make so many videos and people would ask the same questions. And I was like, I'm going to make a program of how I train, right? And he was a PT, still is a PT. Well, not practicing, but he has his personal training, whatever. He was a PT. He was a photographer. He was like, I believe in you. I believe in your brand. Let me sign off because I'm not a PT. You have to have a PT sign off. He's like, let me look at all your workouts. I'll sign it off and I'll take all the photos. And I was like, what do you want from me? Yeah. Like, this was like a week into...
You sound like a user.
I was like, you're not getting a cut of anything I make. Yeah. So I made him sign a contract. This was like
you sound like
this was like our second date. Yeah. And I was living in my parents' house. I had no money. I had nothing. And he was like, who do you think you are? Like, I was acting all elite. And I was like, I'm going to be massive. Okay. So I made him sign this contract, which still we talk about. And I'm like, you still get no cut of it. Like, you married me, but like, whatever. And yeah, I was so sus. But basically he helped me. He took all the photos. He signed off on it all. And I remember I was like, no one's going to buy this. No one's going to buy this ebook. I wanted to do this event that I could kind of give back and meet people who were watching me. And I was like, it's going to be so embarrassing. No one's going to come. Right. So I went to our local gym, like a gym in the city that was kind of big. And I was like, this is so embarrassing. There's so much space. Like, no one's going to come. It was insane. It was like 1,000 people ended up coming. And at that point, I only had 100K subscribers.
That's insane.
Insane. And that was worldwide. And I remember my ex-boyfriend messaged me, and we're on good terms. We've always been on good terms. He messaged me, and he was working like 2 blocks up the road in the city. And he said, there are people lining up outside of my work with your face on their shirt. I'm so proud of you. I was like.
That's quite the ex move.
I was like, you want me back?
Sorry about it.
Sorry, but my new boyfriend took the photos. But that was the moment that I was like, wow, people actually care. People are buying my product. It did so much better than I anticipated.
Yeah, and also like ebooks I mean, obviously with the start of my journey as well, but how much were you selling the ebooks for?
$69.99.
Right, so $69.99, 1,000 people turned up to an event.
Yeah.
Just for context.
No, so
that's a fucking, like, that's a lot of money to be making.
my whole family were there wearing
Yeah.
my Sarah's Day t-shirts, like giving out merch.
Yeah.
And my PayPal crashed because they thought I was doing something illegal
Yeah.
because I was a uni student,
Yeah.
right? So I had like $200 in my PayPal account.
Right. And
then all of a sudden it was like, so they shut it down, but they didn't tell me
had
because
this as well.
Yes, they shut it down. They didn't want to stress me out. So my team, I used Hello Studio, shout out to them. They made my first ebook for free because they were like, we're trying to get up and running. We'd love to give you exposure. Like, we'd love to kind of get exposure off your channel. And I was like, okay. Now, like, we obviously pay them good rates, but we kind of did a collaboration and they troubleshot it all for me behind the scenes of my event because they were like, oh my gosh.
But that must have been unbelievable. How did that feel overnight? You not just the traction and like people there, but also like behind the scenes, completely honestly, I assume that was like a huge amount of money to suddenly hit your account and to kind of be like, oh my God.
To go from 40K in debt because of my uni degree, which I didn't, what did I get? I got like 6 weeks into finishing it and I left uni because YouTube got intense, whatever. We kind of skipped that part, but I left uni, was $40-something thousand in debt to having the money to be able to pay off that debt. Pros and cons. Not necessarily a con. Actually, I think it's kind of positive. It was that sense of, I guess, financial stability for the first time in my whole life was amazing, but I actually loved that what excited me more was genuinely, and I feel fake saying this, but honestly, was seeing everyone's faces and meeting people and meeting girls with hormonal acne and them coming with no makeup. That was my high.
Of course. Oh, 100%.
But genuinely, and I remember hearing people say things like that. I'm like, shut up. You can go buy a car now, as if that's not, and it wasn't. Like, when that happened, I was like, oh. Like,
like this actual
cool.
human connection.
Yeah. And my dad was crying, saying, I'm so proud of you. What are you going to do? And, you know, I'm a saver. So I was like, I had nothing to buy. Like, I wanted to stay living at home. Oh no, I was living with Kurt at the time, but we had a tiny apartment. We were super happy. Like, I don't need big extravagant things. But yeah, it was actually shocking how much the money didn't get me going. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I'm really proud of myself. But yeah, it was more that connection sense. And I only believe people now that it's happened to me.
Yeah.
You know, like, money does not buy happiness. It definitely calms me. Like, financial stability makes me a calmer person, totally. But it's not my driving factor.
Completely understand that. And what happened next in terms of your content, in terms of your kind of career, what you were creating? From
there, this 2017 was a weird year for me. 2017, maybe even 2017. We kind of had a brief chat about this off camera before. It was a time on social media where you got kind of cancelled for anything. There was trends, and if you weren't a part of the trend, your comments were just insane. So, you know, my diet fluctuations started because of my skin and then became about being shredded, having abs, or being part of a culture.
Yeah.
And, you know,
which was very of the time in terms of kind of people. We were very much in that Fitspo area, I think is important to say. There was definitely a little bit of a transition more to like lifting weights and stuff. Yeah. But I would say it was still very much in the like big bowl of colourful fruit phase.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you couldn't be a hybrid, right? On Instagram specifically at the time, you were either a raw vegan who ran and did Pilates, or you were, if it fits your macros, and you were lifting heavy. And I, at the time, wanted my feet in both a little bit. I was like, I want to eat fruit and I want to do Pilates, but I also want to train glutes. But at that time, and I think at my age, I wasn't mature enough to be myself and say, this is what I want to do, take it or leave it. I was conditioned, or I conditioned myself even, and relied heavily on the comments and I guess the approval of others to say, okay, you're right. I am a raw vegan and I do love running. I hate running, but I tried that, and I would read people's comments saying, yeah, you know, animal products are going to kill you and this and that. And I would go, yeah, okay, cool. So I would push this vegan train, and then my skin would break out. I would see my naturopath. He would really push high fat paleo. I'd say, okay, cool, high fat paleo. So I would take that and try to help my audience and say, guys, let's go high fat paleo. Let's do resistance training. And I look back now, and my enthusiasm and my passion as much as I was trying to come from a positive space, other people watching it were judging their own eating habits and were I guess, were leaving my channel feeling negative about themselves and comparing themselves to me. And I definitely got in this spiral of needing to look like the rest of the Fitspo girls to have a place. I felt unworthy to have the level of subscribers I did, the level of engagement I did without abs. Like how could I be a fitness channel when I didn't have cap shoulders and abs? Or how would I be a health channel if I didn't eat everything organic and I was grain free?
Right.
So it was trying to appease all of the different markets. But at the end of the day, I think I look back and I'm like, I was a part of that toxic culture where I was just trying to be too perfect. And it's exhausting. It doesn't exist.
And I think it's really important to look back and to be able to recognize like, oh, actually, I probably promoted something that was quite unhealthy.
I was eating protein powder on toast. Protein powder on protein toast. A recommended vlog came up and it was me and I was like, I had no eyebrows back then. I don't know what was happening. Also, I lost my period. And I look back and I'm like, sis, you weren't eating enough. And
but
you
it
were
was
doing
probably the time as well that you were looking the most
shredded.
Fitspo.
I looked 12. Okay, so like whatever you're into, but like I looked like a shredded 12-year-old. I was going through a breakup. My job was to work out. I was at the gym for 3 hours. 3 hours a day, and I only ate protein bread, protein powder, fish, pumpkin. That's it. That is it. I didn't have my period, but I was so encapsulated in that life. And I genuinely thought I was being so healthy and so #wellness that I was doing these videos saying, I've lost my period. I don't know why I have amenorrhea. You have amenorrhea because your body's in fight or flight and you're working out for 3 hours a day. You're not eating enough calories. You're not sleeping enough. You're getting up at 5 a.m. to train. You're going to bed at 2 a.m. because you don't have an editor. You're editing your own vlogs. I look back and I'm like, I just wish I could talk to her and say, go and eat some sourdough.
Yeah.
Go for a walk. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like.
I think it's really important though, because it's important for you to look back and be able to say, do you know what, that was unhealthy.
Yeah.
And as a result of the fact that I had a platform, I was promoting something unhealthy. However, the intention behind that kind of comes from the fact that we give people a platform. I'm not saying you shouldn't have had a platform. I had a platform when, there would be times where I like said things, I mean, I don't think I've ever said anything hugely problematic, but like, as in like, I would definitely be like way in on like macro counting, like all of those things. Yeah. And it's like, platforms are created and people are put on a pedestal.
Yeah, yeah. And everything you say is gospel, but it's like, I was 22. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm learning like you.
So there's a responsibility, of course, from your side and from the platform side.
Yeah.
But it's also like it also needs to be recognized that you were learning at the same time, in the same way as like I followed a lot of fitness influencers who it's turned out a year later they've revealed that they had an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And it's sure that might have then been promoting unhealthy things during that time because they were posting fitness and eating content. But the intention behind it, you cannot shame someone for having a disorder of some kind or getting taken off like down a trend or like down some sort of rabbit hole, or like the content that blows up is the stuff that's actually probably the unhealthiest. Of course, when you're aware of that, then you have a duty.
To go back and say, I'm so sorry. But when you're in it, you're like,
but you're also a 22-year-old who's trying to get into the gym and also like trying to, of course you have
navigate
a responsibility.
Heartbreak and.
But also, you don't know, if you knew in that moment it was unhealthy, I'm sure you wouldn't have been doing that.
It's like, why would I vlog this and be like, everybody eat like this?
If it's intentionally different, that's tough.
Everyone is always evolving, and it's like, even you might look back one day on your first business podcast and say, I would never use that advice now. Like everyone, and that's fine. But in the moment, you're doing your best. You're trying to give, I guess, some helpful advice. And that's the core of my channel, was always trying to be vulnerable, give helpful advice. But I look back and I'm like,
maybe. Well, because I also look back at my like 20-year-old self online and I'm like, I get it. You found this content entertaining and like you guys enjoyed it and all of this, but like, why the fuck were you taking advice
from me?
And of course, that's not anyone's fault, but it's also like, it is wild that we platform 20-year-olds and then get angry at the fact that they might not give the best advice.
I know.
Because actually, I think that most people, if they look at how they were when they're 20, they're like, fucking glad I didn't have
Totally.
that one,
And that's
there's no way.
literally, I'm like, if you're the same person now as you were 10 years ago, like something's wrong with you. Everyone should be evolving all the time. I look back on like my first videos where I would make a cake. Now that I have a cooking app, and I've done, you know, so much more research, and I work with a chef and I know the ins and outs of ingredients, I look back on that video, I'm like, why would anyone make this cake? It literally doesn't make sense. Like, there's 20 flours in here, 20 different stabilizers, 20 different sugars. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it's like, at that time, I was like, this is my healthy cake. Like, yeah.
No, I think it's really interesting. And I think that when we look back at it critically, it's both important from the influencer's point of view, but also it is quite like especially someone like you who actually took off at the beginning of the industry. I think for people who are taking off now, they can probably look at the mistakes of others who were a few years ago and go like, do you know what? I'm actually, and at every age, I think we think we're old enough to give advice and we think we're mature enough. Like, I think I'm pretty mature. I think, you know, I think my business advice is probably like quite good from what I've learned. And then I actually look back at myself every year and I'm like, God, I wish you'd known this, or I wish you know this. Yeah, exactly. And like, honestly, like, do not.
But I like reflecting on my own, especially that whole wellness era. I like reflecting on what I've shared in the past, what I prioritized and heroed in the past, because I'm so much more conscious now, not even in terms of what I share, but what I fixate or focus on in my life. And I'm, as much as I hope it didn't negatively affect people, I'm glad I personally went through it, because it's made me such a balanced person now. Like, I had to be my own guinea pig. It sounds bad, but I had to go through that whole macro accounting, vegan, plant-based, running 3-hour gym to get to the point I'm at now, because I've done all of that and it's not for me. And now I'm like, I had to go through that to get here.
Yeah, and I also assume you're a much better online creator for it, because you're probably like, I've learned this now, but actually maybe in a year I'll feel it's wrong. So I'm not going to take as strong a stance in what I'm saying in this moment, because I'm aware that it might, you know, my opinion might change.
Even the whole, like, I'll always say, different foods work for different people. Different workouts work for different people. This is what I'm doing. I'm never like, you guys need to be doing Pilates and you need to be having a matcha. Like,
right. Whereas back in the day, like, I remember like lots of my fitness content was like, macros is the best way to get your desired body. Like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I felt that so strongly at the time. And if you'd had held a gun to my head and been like, do you genuinely believe this? I would have been like, yes, take me. But like, I genuinely would have believed that. And now I could not be further from that. And I could not be further from thinking that actually anything that messes up your head is worth it for your body, any of those 100%. Things. But I think that's why it's so important as well, both for us to have these retrospective conversations, but also for, like, it's part of the platform's like responsibility, but it's also part of our kind of responsibility as people consuming content too. Of course, most of the responsibility falls on the creator, but like, you can't learn things before you learn things, and therefore the responsibility does, like, we all have to be taking things with a pinch of salt. Like, I'm never as obsessed as I used to be with creators, because I'm like, I also know that I'll like get into their content and then in a year I'll be like, that's not for me anymore, because it's like, take what you need when you need it and then like on to the next. I'd love to know at that time then, what was the kind of changing, like, when did your career change from that point of kind of being mainly health and fitness? I know you were sharing your relationship or your kind of like general life around that.
To a vlogging life.
Yeah, that kind of more.
I think dating Kurt. Dating an extrovert and someone who was so excited by YouTube and my career and just excited to hang out with me, that opened me up a lot more to vlog my relationship and vlog what we were doing in the day and my sisters and my family. So I think that Kurt really brought me to a new level of opening up my life.
Were you ever worried, because you'd been through a public breakup before, were you ever worried that that would happen again?
No, because at that time, I maybe had 100K. Everyone was there for a genuine, you know, supportive reason. So I knew that if something did happen with Kurt and I and we broke up, everyone would be supportive at that time. So yeah, no. And that's kind of my stance on a lot of things. Like, even in terms of like when I got pregnant, I told people really close to me, because if something happens, I want support. Like, I'm a person who I need to talk through things. So I'd rather overshare. So when something maybe goes wrong or doesn't go the right way, I can kind of, people will know why I'm upset or why I'm acting different. So I'd rather be an open book.
And were people always nice about the relationship online?
I mean, no, but I do this thing. where I say I have like blurry goggles. When I read comments, I literally, when you can stare at something, this sounds really weird. When you can stare at something and literally kind of like blur your eyes a little bit?
Yeah.
I do that with comments.
Right.
Literally. So with comments, when I feel like when I hit 1 million subscribers, the negativity was exacerbated.
Well, because also the algorithm reacts so that, because for each person who's interested, they're assuming another set of people who are interested. Yeah. So it's exponential.
Well, it's like I hate getting on the trending page of YouTube because all the comments are like, why is this trending?
Yeah.
Why is this? I'm like, don't click it. It's called Newborn Essentials. If you don't have a newborn, this is probably not essential for you. Like, literally, my Newborn Essentials video got like number 3 trending, and I was like, great. But then all the trolls are like, why the heck is this on YouTube? I'm like, why did you click it?
Yeah.
It's about babies.
Yeah.
And cots. Like, stop.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I've always liked being open and honest and like sharing more, because then I feel like people can connect with me better and understand if I'm in a bad mood.
Yeah. And there's this really interesting thing I read about there's this person called Gia Tolentino, who's this amazing author, and she does a lot of like writing on social media and kind of it's really, really interesting. And I'd highly recommend for anyone who hasn't read her stuff to read her stuff. But she talks about this interesting thing called context collapse. So if you talk to your mum about something, you're probably going to talk about it. Say if you're telling her a story about like you and Kurt, you're probably going to tell a different story to your sister or to your, I don't know, to Kurt or to your son. Yeah. Like you change the way you say things for each person to tailor it to the way that they receive it, to the way that the things that they want to know, all of those different. Yeah, exactly. Or like how much you share with them, all of those different things. We put things on the internet and we expect it to have appropriate context collapse for each person who consumes it.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because you thinking of you having 1 million subscribers. Yeah. You're trying to tell 2 people the same story and you're telling it differently between 2 people in your family. So likely to be pretty similar. Extrapolating that to 1 million people worldwide, and expecting that to be seen in different cultures, different people, different ages, different lifestyles in the appropriate way you intended it.
It's like therapy.
Is actually kind of unbelievable.
This is therapeutic because now, do you know, like I went through a period specifically with my second pregnancy where I really drew back a little bit on YouTube because I couldn't please everyone.
Yeah.
And half of my vlog was spent disclaiming, hey guys, I know that I'm not a doctor and this and that, and I know people go, my whole video was a disclaimer, and half of my subscribers were like, babe, you don't need to disclaim, like we get it, we're here for you. And then the other half were like, you didn't say XYZ. I'm like, that is what I need to hear. It's like you cannot
take
make everyone
what you need, leave what you need as well. And like we have to be able to do that, but it's also expected, like we as creators need to know that it's unlikely that other people are going to do that when they're consuming it. Like of course. And there are some things that's not appropriate to, like, I don't know, racism or any of those things. Like, of course, that's not, that it kind of doesn't apply to that, but it does apply to when you're sharing your life, any of those stories that you would tell differently, you actually cannot target it in the right way, which I think is really interesting. And I also think, how you say about disclaimers, what's really interesting since I've stopped creating content, other really than the podcast.
Yeah, I miss your vlogs. When you would make mushrooms all the time.
Oh my God, yeah. I had so many this morning. I made a cafe. I was like in a cafe and they didn't have mushrooms on the menu. And I was like, you need mushrooms on toast?
I'll go and buy them.
And it's like when people are like, you've changed. I'm like, I promise you
I haven't.
Like, I really wish I had. But like because I'm not actively creating as much content, I have lost a lot of that ability to disclaim that I used to have because I talk to people in like the main way I tell stories or any of these things is no longer telling stories to a camera. It's the kind of relationships I have with people online.
Well, it's even like before we started recording, you're like, oh, everyone here is really nice.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
Before we'd like to start, I'd like to disclaim that I'm really sorry about my past and don't take anything I say literally because I don't know. I come from disclaimer world still. Yeah. I'm still a YouTube girl.
But it's so interesting because I used to be so good at that, and now I kind of assume people are going to do it. And
now you need me to come on and disclaim for you.
I need you to come on and do my little disclaimers for me. But it's so interesting because actually when you spend a lot of time in that content creation world, it seems completely impossible not to create a single piece of content without being like, oh no, can't say this way.
That's why I need to take breaks, because then you end up making content to appease people, and then you reflect and you go, I don't even like this. What am I doing? So it's like you get caught in this rat race, and I'm currently kind of, we should have done this interview in a week's time, like in New Year's, because before the start of every year, like everyone, you sit down, you do your goals. This is going to be a very pivotal year for me. Like 2023 will be very pivotal. And it's kind of, I'm in that spot now where I'm kind of taking a step back, looking at my content, thinking, am I doing this because I'm disclaiming and appeasing people, or it's because it's what I want to be putting out there?
Yeah, I completely understand that. And before we move on to the next topic, I'd like to know, when you look back, obviously it's really important that you went through every part of your journey. Is there anything that stands out to you as something that you would have done differently?
No, because I love, especially, I feel like if you're a person and you love where you are and you feel so, I hate the word blessed, but hashtag blessed. I am so content in my life right now with my family, with my job and everything, that I get scared if I say, oh, I would have changed this. Would I be here now? Like, I love everything about my life right now. I was saying to my mum the other day, I'm living the best years of my life right now as a mum, as a business owner. I'm so content. So I'm like, no, yeah, do I wish I could kind of go back and not, maybe have that toxic reaction with people? Do I wish I didn't do If It Fits Your Macros? Do I wish I didn't do as many ab selfies? Yes, actually.
That would be the one.
I wish I didn't do this as much to the camera.
Oh, yeah.
And like shred my abs and take as many ab photos, because I don't think that's positive, and I don't think any audience is going to leave that feeling empowered.
Yeah.
Everyone sees that and
it might be saved in my motivation folder.
Yeah, so it's like that. But for me personally, if it's about me, no, because it helped me learn and evolve and I'm not that person anymore. But in terms of my audience, yeah, I wish I didn't do that to them.
Yeah, and I think contextually, like, you need to look at the whole industry and everything contextually when looking at, like, if you look at my content back in the day, if you put it into today's context, you'd be like, who the hell is this girl? But it's also like, considering we're all in the same fitness industry at the same time, learning the same things. We all went through that.
I was a double A, holding up my double A's. Like, what was I doing? I remember I met Kurt and I was like this, and he's like, babe, you don't need to do that. And I was like, oh. I'm not even holding up anything. But like the whole, like,
yeah, I know exactly the one. Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, and I think it's important to be able to, especially because it feels like such a defense mechanism just not to talk about it, and just to be like, no, do you know what? I'm not going to talk about like my, like the part. I'm sorry, okay. Yeah. But like, I do think it is really important, because I think that it keeps the conversation open, and I think it, with anything super public, there's going, like, your mistakes are going to be made publicly. And as you say, your mistakes shaped your career and your person now. And
I still will get comments saying, back in 2017, you said this. I'm like, let's sit down and talk about it. Let's sit down and talk about it, because I'm not that girl anymore. Yeah. And I don't think like that anymore. And like,
growth is important. Yes. And I think the best way we can normalize that is by actually talking about it, which I think it's so good. Well, I think it's so good that you do that. I'd like to talk about motherhood. Because you've been so open about your journey online. Can we go back to when you first found out that you were pregnant?
Yeah.
And what that was like, how you shared that online, what the whole process was like?
I've always been so excited to be a mother. I
remember you always used to say that in your content.
Like, even in primary school, we went around and people were like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a teacher. I was like, I'm going to be a mum. I'm going to be the best mum. I remember saying that. My teacher was like, shut up.
I wanted that so much that and I said it so much that which is strange now because I'm very much not like that now, but my sister once told me, she goes, do you know, if you say you're going to be a really good mum, you're not going to be a good mum? And it was to shut me up because I said it so much. Which is such a classic sister thing. Which is such a classic sister thing, but I was like, God, that's such like a, I was like, that really shows how much I used to say it. She was like, shut the fuck up.
Well, my mum is still the mother I look up to. Like, she says she was put on this planet to be a mother, and I vouch for that. So before I got pregnant, Kurt and I were living together, and I got told I had PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. We could dive into that, but basically my blood work showed something, but then my symptoms showed something different. They were like, you have PCOS, but it's weird. But basically, you're not going to get pregnant by yourself whenever you want that. And I was distraught and really upset. I wasn't trying for a baby at all. Like, I didn't want to have a baby then. I think I was like 24 when I got told that. and I wanted to be married, and Kurt and I were still dating. Like, we were still fresh. So I was like, that's really upsetting. And they said, it's fine. You can do IVF. You'll be fine. And that was eating me up inside. I was like, no, like this, I just thought, you know, I'm 24. I thought you just like try to have a baby, have a baby.
Yeah,
so
I know how to do it.
Yeah. So I was like, this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought, well, I can't get pregnant, right? So like YOLO, you know, I don't care. And I wasn't on the pill for ages because of my acne and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have any kind of birth control. And one day my period was overdue and I was smelling all these weird things. My boobs were really sore. And Kurt was like, why don't you take a pregnancy test? I was like, I can't, like that's.
How far were you guys into dating?
Maybe 2 years, maybe. Oh.
And had you spoken about children?
Yeah. So like first date, Kurt went back to his roommate and said, I'm going to marry that girl. And I was like, this guy's an F-boy. So I literally was like, I don't know if I'm going to get a second date. And then our second date, he said he loved me. Like, he's like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I thought that was just him. But like, he is a lover. But he was like, no, I just knew. Like, I just knew you were my wife kind of thing.
I'm so avoidant. I'd run for the hills.
Yeah. Well, I did. We went through a phase, maybe like 4 months into dating, that I tried to break up with him. And he was like, this is like, we're going to get married. And I was like, you're freaking crazy, bro.
Why did you want to break up with him at that time?
That because he was like so lovely. I think I was self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
I was like, why are you so nice? Like something's wrong. He was so nice. And I was like, and I kind of liked a bad boy. And he had a bit of a bad boy in him, but I brought out the really nice side of him. So we were together for 2 years and I took a pregnancy test and I remember seeing it positive, being so confused. Like, first of all, how the heck is this positive? I got told I could never get pregnant naturally. Number two, this was the phase, and I'm still kind of in this phase. I love watching people's pregnancy announcements. Yeah. And I would always think, when I'm married, when I'm 30, what am I going to do? What am I going to film for it? I remember sitting on the toilet thinking, this is my pregnancy. Should I go get my vlogging camera? And I was like in this daze and I got my vlogging camera and I sat and I started crying. Yeah. And I remember even looking at my camera thinking, this is so surreal. Yeah. I went out, I bought a onesie to like surprise Kurt and I was like, I'm making a pregnancy announcement vlog. Yeah. Like, it's like, I guess you sitting now thinking, imagine tomorrow you're doing like a wedding vlog or something. It's like surreal, you know? Like it was crazy. Yeah. But, and I didn't know how to think it at the time because like you said you grew up always wanting to be a mum. That was me. Then that year, I think that was like 2018. That year I had all of these opportunities. I was going to go to New Zealand, America. I had everything booked and I was like, I'm not in a mummy mode. I'm in business mode. I'm like, done. Kurt and I talked about it. We said, you know, if we get married, we'll have kids one day, whatever. Let's like dominate. Yeah. The next week, boom.
Well, I think it's really interesting too, because I don't know about you, and I think obviously everyone's kind of experience is very individual. But I always was really, really, really obsessed with the idea of having a family. And then actually over the past few years, while I still definitely do want a family and hope that one day I'll be able to have one, I also, the last few years has been the first time I've even critically thought about like, actually, like, do I definitely want children?
I think it's programmed into us.
Or have I assumed that because I'm a woman and we're told growing up that like, you know, when are you going to have babies and when are you going to get married and all of these things, and then kind of being like, oh, I think I do still want that, but actually assuming like, actually, like every penny I make could go to me. I could move to Costa Rica for a year. I could go and do this. I could go and do this. There would be no, like, I could be entirely selfish, like all of these different things. Yeah. And I think only in the past year, past few years, I've kind of even critically thought. And so I can imagine at that time when your career suddenly takes a completely different shape, I can imagine it would have been really like...
And it was a lot to do with my body as well. Like a lot of the opportunities were me being a certain size, having a physique. This is why I believe everything happens for a reason. Yeah. And I think maybe... if I hadn't got pregnant then by accident, maybe I would have never had kids because I would have, I don't want to say get caught in that trap, but I would have really been obsessed with this whirlwind of business and success. And now being a mum with 2 boys, I know for myself, that is my happiest, that is my purpose. I love business as well and I love my content and I love my brand. But I feel like if Fox hadn't happened at the time he happened, I don't know where I would have been. So I'm like, I feel like God did that to be like, you do want this. I'm telling you, like, I'm going to slip it in. You're going to make it work.
Surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
Happy birthday.
We call him our love baby. But I'm so grateful that he was a love baby, because I don't know what my plan would have been, because now I don't really have, I'm like a go with the flow kind of person.
And did you know that Kurt would be happy when you told him?
Yes.
What if you'd filmed and he'd be like, oh,
no,
so what are we going to do, honey?
He was born to be a dad. And you know, our second date, he was like, if we had a kid, what would we call him, or what would we call her? And we had talked about baby names. And the vlog prior, we had been like, imagine when we have kids and we go snowboarding as a family. Like, he was so excited. So I knew he wouldn't believe me because I got told I couldn't have kids. But I was never scared about that.
Am I right in thinking, from my superfan status, that you also had HPV at some point, or potential?
Yes, I actually need to go to the gyno about that. Yes, so I had SYN3, which is cervical dysplasia stage 3, which is the most severe stage of that kind of category. Again, I'm not a gynecologist, so I had SYN3. That was a really tough time, because the next kind of progression of that can be cervical cancer. So they recommended I get a LEEP procedure, which is basically like a laser, I'm pretty sure, that they cut a little bit or they burn a little bit of your cervix off.
Was this before you had?
This was before Fox. So this was a few months before. And the risks of a LEEP procedure potentially is, potentially changes or difficulties with your pregnancy or with giving birth, because your cervix is the thing that dilates and opens and holds up your baby in your uterus. So with the, I guess, approval from my gynecologist, I said, can you give me a certain amount of time to try to see if my body will regress it, or I don't want to say heal it naturally, but your body can regress, it can go back. And he said, yeah, I'll give you, I think he gave me like 3 months or something. I did all the research I could. I went to every naturopath, every herbalist. I lived my life to try to fill my body with things that would encourage a SYN3 regression. So when I went back, I was possible low grade. So like maybe some cells, but not high grade. So.
And how did you feel about sharing that online? Because I know that's quite controversial to essentially be saying you're going for a more holistic approach rather than going for traditional medicine.
Yeah. Well, there's like a chapter written about me in this medical book saying I'm giving bad medical advice. And I'm like, this is where disclaimers are important. You know, I am not a doctor. I'm not a gynecologist. I don't want to sit here and say I healed my cervical dysplasia, because who knows? If I didn't do the protocol I did, maybe my body would have naturally regressed, because it does happen with women. So I don't know. But
I guess as a side effect of you happening to show your life online, I guess it does share that.
But my thing was, when I found out I had cervical dysplasia, I was consuming any content I could. I went to the library, I was buying books about it. I was consuming content about, I was watching vlogs with women who had it, maybe recovery stories, people who had healed it, regressed, who had got the LEEP procedure, women who had regretted getting the LEEP procedure. Like we talked about prior, I'm just, at that point, a 24-year-old girl, 25 maybe, doing my best, not knowing what to do. And then when I got that amazing news that it had regressed to a possible low grade, not even low grade SYN1, it was possible low grade. Once you have HPV, you have it, and it kind of stays dormant in your body and can, ebb and flow. But I was like, I would be doing a disservice, I felt, to my audience, to people who maybe wanted to go down that route, and I tried my hardest to do the disclaimer and say, if your gynecologist recommends a LEEP procedure and says you need to do this is dangerous, go and do it. Go and do it. But my gynecologist was like, 3 months, give it a go. If you come back and it's still high grade, let's do it. And I was like, great. So it's kind of like what you said, the vlog or the video and that information was for a very specific consumer. And when it's given to other people who maybe should go and get a LEEP procedure, that's where it gets dangerous. I don't regret it at all. I disclaimed what I could, but it is awkward territory that I still hate talking about, like medical things. But I'm like, that's the content I crave.
All you can do is share your experience.
Yeah, and I'm not going to make everyone happy. And as long as I know I'm coming from the right place and I'm not telling people to boycott the medical system, or I'm like, listen to your doctor. My gynecologist said, go and do your thing, give it a go. I don't have great hopes for you, but like, okay. And it worked. Now I still haven't had my LEEP, but I need to go back. So now I have to get pap smears obviously every year, but I need to be getting biopsies and colposcopies where they like take a little chunk of my cervix and check it, because it can kind of go from 0 to 100 really quickly.
So this is everyone's reminder to go and get their smear test.
Pops me. Yeah.
So did you always know that you were going to share your pregnancy online?
Yeah.
And when you started sharing it, how was people's response? I can imagine really excited at the beginning, and then I can imagine a lot of advice coming in.
So, oh my gosh, even now the mummy advice, it's like, I don't know. I just try to think from, if I get a comment saying you shouldn't be putting your baby down like that, like let them sleep X, Y, and Z, I just try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and be, play devil's advocate and think they're just a loving mother trying to help me. It does get a little frustrating, but I'm like, I think most of those mummy advice, I have friends who their focus and their purpose in life is motherhood. So when they give advice, that's how they show their love. So I kind of just think like that. But I didn't really get a lot of backlash with my pregnancy because I wasn't very, I don't want to say passionate about one way or the other. I was just pretty like, I'm sharing it. Yeah, I'm like, I'm eating healthy, I'm working out. I'm not like hardcore this way or hardcore that way. I wasn't giving advice. I'm just like, I'm doing my best. I was still eating chicken nuggets and like Easy Mac. I found it a really, really nice time to vlog because I had the pressure off myself to look a certain way and pregnancy.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it was my favorite.
That it's like you, as a fitness influencer, felt that you were having a break while pregnant from looking a certain way. I think that says a lot. And
even eating a certain way. Like I feel like before I was pregnant, I felt that personal pressure to always be super healthy. And I wanted to be, definitely. But it got to the point where I was too obsessed with being super healthy and getting scared of getting a comment saying, chia seeds are carcinogenic or something. I was like so careful that everything I ate was like health approved. So when I was pregnant, I was like, no one can hate me. I'm pregnant. Yeah. If I'm craving Skittles for dinner, I'm craving Skittles.
Yeah.
And that was such a pivotal point for me and my brand and me as a person, because my first pregnancy was a snowball effect of how I live my life now.
Yeah.
Moderation of everything, not hardcore health, not hardcore sometimes food, as we call them in our house. Like it reset my digestive system. I was able to eat gluten again and dairy again, and it reset my hormones, and pregnancy was the best thing that could have happened to my sense of self and my body.
Yeah, no, completely understandable. And how was your first kind of foray into motherhood then?
My first
as in
experience?
Once Fox was born?
Fox was gnarly. He still is. He's hectic. Like compared to my second, I remember sitting down thinking is Fox a tough baby, or is motherhood just tough? Fox is just a tough baby.
Right.
I'm so glad that Fox, he had reflux. He was never happy. He was always crying. And I loved it, but I remember thinking, how the heck am I going to maintain my channel, maintain my businesses, and take time away from him? And the mum guilt of your first child is like nothing I could have ever experienced. I couldn't even go to the gym. I would go to the gym and start crying because I felt so guilty. And I think a lot of that is because growing up, my mum's whole purpose was just motherhood. That is it. We went everywhere with her, which was amazing. But I put her on this pedestal of Fox needs to be with me all the time. I can't have any time out because this is the season of selflessness. And now I look back, I'm like, I love that for my mum. But for me as an individual, I'm my best self and I'm the best mother when I have 45 minutes to go to Pilates. So now I don't feel guilty.
Well, it's so interesting because I know as well that there's no way I'll be a good mother if I'm not working. I don't think personally. And having grown up with a working mum who was, I would not say anything like that at all. She's amazing in so many ways, but it definitely wasn't the, being with all the time, all of this. A lot of my childhood was punctuated by and I turned out great. It's actually hilarious. My the managing director of Tala, who I obviously work really close with, she's a mother, and she always literally says to me, she's like, every time I feel guilty about working, I remember that you had a mother who worked all the time and you're great.
I'm navigating this.
She's like, I feel better.
Yeah. See, I'm navigating this for the first time because my mum went back to work when we were 12, and she only went back 2 days a week, and she was like, nah, I just want to be at home with you guys, which was amazing. I had the best childhood. So I'm trying to replicate that and give my boys the best childhood while also honoring my passions and my skills. I was born to be this hybrid of a businesswoman, but also a really hands-on mum.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's so interesting as well, because it's obviously such a privilege to be in a position where you can do both that, like where you can work from home, where your children are actually integrated in your work in terms of being able to share your family, like all of those types of things. Yeah. But I can imagine that also makes it quite tough because work's there all the time, children are there all the time.
I say to my friends as well who are working mums, I'm like, you really can't be 100% and 100%. You're either 70% good at business, 70% good at being a mum, and that's okay. And I feel like once I accepted that, I'm like, that's fine.
Well, it's like and obviously I'm not a mother, so I have no idea, but in terms of, in a relationship, like I always talk about the fact that like there are going to be times where one of you's 90%, one of you's 10%, you're going to be 50-50, you're going to be 60-40. Like it needs to be flexible in those ways in order for the relationship to work, because life is not smooth sailing. That should be the smooth sailing thing. Like it's accompanying, the rest of your life, but that requires some sort of flexibility, and expecting it to always be this kind of 50-50 or 100% great mother, 100% great at work, all of those things.
That's when you get mum guilt. And I think that's the best learning experience for me in terms of my first, raising Fox versus raising Malachi. I was trying to be the best mother who I did sensory play every day. We did, different rounds of different games. And then I'm also on the phone 24/7 and uploading a vlog every day. And I was burning myself to the ground, feeling guilty when I wasn't with Fox, feeling guilty when I wasn't uploading content. And now I'm like, my slogan is, I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Which I absolutely love. And I will also say that the expectation for you to be good at both is only on you because you're a woman.
Totally.
I think we assume that men can be better fathers when they're providing for their family and at work. And the fact that we've changed the entire landscape in terms of work and yet still assume that mothers need to be the primary carers, etc., etc.
I said to Kurt, I was saying to Kurt, I was like, why don't you be a stay-at-home dad? And he was like, I could never. So we're very similar. So we tag team. We usually do half days. So he'll go into the office in the morning and I have the boys and I'll take them to creche, and I love taking them to meetings and the gym and things like that and showing them my routine, because even Fox, now he's like loving his jiu-jitsu and he loves going to swimming and he says, I'm going to go burn some energy. I'm like,
great.
Love that.
You are your mother's son.
Yes. Or he goes, let's go to work and do some work. I'm like, let's do that. And he'll bring his colouring in and be like, I'm working. I'm like, yes. I love modelling. I love modelling that to him, like that work ethic. I love that, he gets to see that. But yeah, I need to have both. I can't, and I don't want to be at the office all day.
Yeah, and I also think it's so important as well that you've showed that journey of you trying to be one thing, deciding you might be another thing, all of these different things online. Yeah. Because I can imagine you having said, I was made to be a mother and these children will be my whole life. And then when you're going back to work and you're doing a lot of this, I can imagine some people probably would have said, hey, I thought you said you were going to be this. Yeah. And it's like, I've never had a child before. Yeah. Like I'm learning as I go along, and I happen to be sharing, but you have to respect the fact that I'm on this journey too.
And I think even for people who listening who aren't businesswomen or, working, even if you want to go and get your hair done and get your nails done and do things that maybe are glamorous, you need to have an hour.
It doesn't need to just be something that is productive, making money or productive for your family in order to be worth your time. 100%. And also the same as, I guess, in any relationship, when you lose yourself and you don't prioritize yourself, you are not able to be present in a good way for that other person, for your children, for whatever, because you are no longer yourself. You are just a vessel by which to support other people.
You even this, like sitting down and chatting to you, now I'll be so excited to go home and I have to feed my babies. I'm going to explode in like an hour.
Perfect.
But,
get it on camera.
But that would be really cool. We'll go viral if anyone want a milkshake. No, but I think it took me my second child to give myself that lax and give myself that time to be like, go to Pilates, don't feel guilty about it. They're fine. Yeah.
And so if you feel comfortable, can we talk about your second pregnancy?
Yeah.
Because you've spoken about it publicly. I'd love you to share what you're kind of comfortable sharing. I know it was a difficult journey for you.
So when you're pregnant, you can kind of, I'm not sure what they call it universally, but it's called the Harmony test. It's basically like a genetic testing, which we did with Fox. And when you are, number one, a young couple and you're super healthy, like Kurt and I are both healthy and active and fine, we did the testing. It kind of checks for any severe kind of genetic abnormalities. We did it with Fox. They call you, they say, yep, it's all good. You go, yes, sweet. You don't even think about it. So I did it with Malachi. Again, didn't even think about it. It's a blood test. They can pick up your baby's cells in your own blood because there's fragments of it that come off the placenta, which is really cool. So she called me and basically said, hey, I'm from whatever the lab was, the IVF clinic. It wasn't IVF, but that was the clinic I was going through. Do you have a moment to chat? And as soon as she said that, I was like,
I can't imagine
this
the feeling.
isn't normal. And I remember I was sitting in my home office. I had music up. I was like editing. I was in the best mood. Fox was old enough that it was like motherhood was peaking and my business was peaking and I was pregnant and I was like, woo. And I remember turning off the music and kind of having that self monologue for a split second saying, prepare yourself.
Yeah. And you're like, it's that flash when you're like, I'm going to remember this moment for the rest of my life.
I remember what I was wearing. I remember the weather. I remember what was on my desk. I remember everything. And the worst part of it was the lady, I don't know how this lady has this job to do these calls. So we weren't going to find out the gender. But with a lot of genetic abnormalities, it's gender specific for some of them.
Yeah.
So she said, so with your baby boy, and then I just started crying automatically because I was like,
we weren't meant to find out.
Where am I going to find out? And she went on to tell me the genetic testing and that he came up back with an abnormality. I had never heard of this thing before. I was so confused. And I was waiting for her to be like, oh, sorry, wrong paperwork, not you.
Or like, but it's going to be fine.
But
we
it's
just wanted to let you know.
Or I was like, so she told me and I said, so what do I take? What do I do? Like, we're going to fix it because it's only, he's a little jelly bean. Like, we're going to fix it. And she kind of said like, no, there's nothing you can do. This is him for his life. And from then it was just this roller coaster of, I've never been in a black hole like that in my life. And my family to this day said, I was just a shell of a human. And it was so hard that, especially when you're a mum and your baby comes up and wants to play dress ups, and I've just found out this news. And the hardest part of the whole thing was this was during COVID times. So I had to go in to numerous different genetic counselors and specialists in his genetic difference. And I couldn't go with my husband. So I had to kind of put this armor on and be the tough. And I knew deep down I wanted to keep this baby, right?
Did they advise you?
So I went in and he said, do you know anything about your baby's condition? And by that time it had been like 3 weeks. So I had like a month to sit on this.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The anxiety.
Yeah. And I'm not going to, and so I'm a Christian. So that was even really hard for me to navigate because obviously Christian morals is life is life. But then I started researching this condition and this difference. And I was like, I can't have this baby. Like it's and then I was trying to justify in my head. I was like, this is unfair
Is it
for him.
selfish or is it selfless? Like,
exactly. I'm like, am I doing him a disservice by bringing him into the world? And this. And I called my pastor, like our minister. And I was searching the Bible for a verse that gave me an out. That was like, listen to your gut. And I basically couldn't find it. And it was such, I look back now and it was the biggest blessing. This whole experience was the biggest blessing because it definitely grew my faith, and I would never be the person I am now and even have the group of friends I have now and be as faithful and God-driven as I am now. But yeah, so I walked into this meeting with this genetic specialist thinking, I want to keep this baby and this is my son and I'm going to have this armor on. And I sat there and he kind of said, this baby's going to have no quality of life. He's going to have this, he's going to have that. And I said, is there any genetic abnormality that you would recommend a mother keep her baby? And he said, none. And I said, that's my decision made. The fact that you can say that no one with Down syndrome is worth having on this earth. No one with any microdeletion in the chromosomes is worth having on this earth. I'm like, your opinion now is irrelevant to me because I just don't think that's right. So from there, I did my own research of how can I best support this baby? What is maybe, because with a lot of genetic abnormalities, that it's a spectrum. They can be born with, X, Y, and Z, or just a little bit of a, tweak. And so I've read everything. And the reason I'm not saying what he has is because it's not my place.
Yeah.
Maybe one day he'll want to talk about it. And it's hard because people say, you could be the spokesperson for this condition. Yeah. I'm like, I don't have it.
You don't need to live your life being an example.
Yeah.
For people
it's more so and then people say, well, then why are you talking about it? If you're going to give us half details, why are you opening up? You're just being a pick-me girl.
Yeah, no, that is nosy as fuck.
No. My thing is like, I craved other, when I found out, again, I went to YouTube. I wanted to see people who had found out maybe negative news from their Harmony test, because I wanted to connect with someone, because my best friend at the time was pregnant. Her baby was born 10 days before mine. So we were pregnant at the same time. Yeah. So she came over and was like, my Harmony test is good, woo. And I felt I couldn't connect with anyone. All my friends were having these healthy, gorgeous babies. And I was pregnant at the time, imagining what my life is going to be like, what my baby's going to look like, what my baby's going to be like. And I was just preparing myself for the worst case scenario. Is he ever going to crawl? Is he ever going to talk? Is he ever going to make eye contact? And obviously the whole 9 months was just spent, praying over him and just researching. And even now I've kind of set up a protocol and, a game plan for his life, that if we do need special help, then I've got it kind of in place. But people, you would never know. You would never know. He's just the most gorgeous, chillest, stunning baby. And that's what I think as well. And what kind of got me through it is like our mums wouldn't have even had that testing available to them. So I would have never known. And to this day, I would never know, because he's just a gorgeous, healthy baby. Who knows, in the future something might come up.
And even if he wasn't, it sounds like, that was your decision. And
yeah.
you made in that time.
Yeah. So I think the reason for sharing was just to show others that, I guess, to take the guilt off. And sometimes things just happen. I ask the counselors, I say, what did I do wrong? Did I eat something? And people were like, oh, it's because you're sleeping on a mattress with synthetic fat. No, like seriously, I nearly got rid of my mattress. I nearly got rid of my mattress for like the next baby I want to have. But, sometimes you need to put your hands in the air and say, I think everything happens for a reason. I feel like God plays a part and, puts you in these situations. And now he's the joy of our household. So yeah, I just wanted to show people that I don't like when people say, oh, Instagram's a highlight reel. Mine's not. I get it. We can choose for our Instagram and our YouTube channels and our TikToks to be a highlight reel, but I make a conscious decision to make mine a well-rounded reel.
Yeah.
Highlights, lowlights, middle lights, boring lights, pivotal lights. I want people to feel like they can come to my channel, get my authentic self, get my, my negatives and connect in that way, because I felt so alone.
Yeah, and whether it's pretty or not, because I can imagine some of the time, if you'd shared that and if you hadn't shared that, both would have a huge amount of backlash.
Yeah.
Like if you're sharing that and, as you say, deciding not to disclose everything, people could, especially now that you've had the baby and perhaps like appears that everything's, how they would expect, all of these things, I can imagine you have backlash that's like,
you lied.
Most ridiculous accusations.
Yeah, well, people say, oh, he doesn't look like he had Down syndrome. I'm like, he never did. Like, and then people were like, just confirm or deny, does he have Down syndrome? I'm like, I'm not going to play this game.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say, oh, it's not that. It's not, keep this hot, getting hotter. Like, we're not playing this game. Yeah. We're not playing this game. There is no method, or there is no strategy, to telling people this. It was just.
And equally, if you hadn't showed it, I think people would have had a really big problem. And I also think it would have become like food for gossip in terms of apparently Sarah's baby has this, or like apparently this, which
I knew it was something would get out, because with all of my doctor appointments and all of my midwife appointments and my labor, I had to disclose the information because it's a part of his medical history, and it didn't impact my labor or anything, but they needed to know that for post-labor things. So I was even scared. I was like, what if one of the midwives, all the midwives are my age. So it just takes them to tell their boyfriend, to tell someone else. I'm like, I'd rather just, whatever.
Yeah. And you can only be as open as, like, you can't efface your entire kind of what you feel emotionally comfortable with, what you feel comfortable with sharing, what you want the world to know, what you feel like it is your right to tell the world about your son when he doesn't have the right to tell, like he's not able to tell them yet, all of those different things. So I can imagine whatever you did in that scenario would not have been, I mean, there's a huge amount of support. I know that you get a huge amount of support as you should, but I can imagine nothing being tougher than finding out this news, going through this, deciding to share it, thinking that's the right thing, and also at the same time getting people
backlash,
playing games with you and like all of this stuff. It's like, oh no.
Well, that's the thing. The negative voices are always the loudest in the room, unfortunately. It's like you could have a crowd of people clapping after you've performed, and then you get one boo, and that's what stabs you, So I kind of went into it. I've been on the platform. I've been on social media for over 10 years. nearly 10 years in 2023, knowing that there was going to be backlash, but I was like, and I was a shell of a human at that point. I couldn't care less. I had no emotion. I was emotionless. I was kind of like, whatever. And my priorities were so fixated on this baby and my family that I was like, whatever.
Yeah, my priority is not how I come across. Yeah.
And I think the older I get as well, the less I care about people. And if you have something negative to say about that video, you don't know me and you have not been following me and you don't know what I'm trying to portray here, because
and you'll do your best, but like there's always going to be things that don't come across the right way, and like it is important to make sure you say things in a good way, but actually ultimately when it comes to your personal life and the pain that you've been through and like discovering things like this, all of this, you're processing as it goes. It's impossible for you to be able to process that, share that, do it in a media trained way. Do it in a way that's not, for example, I can imagine that it would be really hard to do it in a way that's not derogatory to anyone who's also decided to have their baby who might also have that condition.
Exactly.
Or decided to terminate the pregnancy. Or
and I had to say that as well and disclaim and say, if you have been in this position and you decided to not have your baby, that is fine. I was there. That wasn't right for me, but there's no judgment,
Exactly. And you cannot live multiple lives, and therefore you cannot live the right context for each person, which I think is incredibly hard. And how have you found it since Malachi was born, having two babies?
Oh, the best. Can I just say, anyone freaking out about a baby and like business and all that stuff, 0 to 1, like no baby and like single Pringle, whatever, to 1 baby is like the craziest whirlwind, toughest, how the heck am I going to do this? Like my life has changed forever. 1 to 2 babies, just like add another Malteser to the box. Yeah. One, but I will say,
see, I might have another dog then.
Malachi, dogs are freaking hard. Like my Abby's hard. Malachi is just the cruisiest. Like I was almost going to bring him because he would probably just sit there and just like smile at us. He's so chill. But yeah, I just feel so, being a mum is my favorite. I need mini breaks because I need to like recharge, and like I need adult stimulation, need to do business. I get creative ideas all the time and I like to execute them, and I'm very reactive. I'm a very reactive person. So I need to be in the office doing something and then coming home. But yeah, anyone who's freaking out, like two boys especially, they're very independent. It's the best. You can do it. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming today. This has been great.
Thank you.
I've learned so much. This has been like I feel like this is like a super fan experience.
Stop. Me too. We should have had some mushroom toast. I feel like I won a
competition.
Do you know what we should have done? Have you seen Hailey Bieber's Who's in My Bathroom?
Yes.
Yeah, we should have made like mushroom toast.
Would be nice.
Mushroom toast and
next time I'm here, or if you're ever in the UK.
Yeah, well, my little sister's moving over there. So
really?
She is.
Oh my God, come. I'll make you some mushroom toast.
Yes, thank you.
In real life.
Thank you.
You'd be like, this is disgusting.
Well, I was going to say when you're back here, but like no one's ever in Australia. It's the best.
I mean,
but
I'd love to come more, but it is on the other side of the world, and therefore I think it's once every 5 years thing.
Yeah, we're in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I get it.
Well, thank you so much. You've been amazing.
Thank you. I'm so glad I didn't spurt milk at you.
Yeah, me too, although it would have been fun.
It's 70% chance that our time is up.